that time of the morning on a Tuesday, you know that we have our usual feature, Constitutionally Speaking. And this morning is no exception. We've been telling you about the topic for discussion. No wonder there's a spike in my listenership at this time. And if I judge from the posting of last week's Constitutionally Speaking feature that was put on our YouTube channel, where it has been amassing hundreds and moving into thousands of views, I'm tempted to describe my very special guest, the Deputy Public Defender, Mr. Herbert McKenzie, as a viral king, because the feature is being watched by so many people. Mr. McKenzie, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning, sir. A new one from the viral king.
Yes. We are coming up with topics that the people are loving and are attuned to, and for that we want to thank you and welcome once again. Hope all is well with you.
All is well, thank you. I wanted to phone that footballer yet.
I don't know.
What's the guy?
And what state might he be in if and when he's found?
Or probably somebody's planning his funeral.
Exactly. My goodness, I tell you, he was in a serious problem there, big time.
I like his quick attempt at damage repair, though.
Yes, he tried his best. Tried his best.
You know, once upon a time, a leader of one of our Caribbean sister states in the Eastern Caribbean was in a situation where he had to give a nice vote of thanks. And you know the usual line, from the bottom of his heart, rather from the bottom of his heart, he took it from my wife's bottom. His situation wasn't helped by the fact that the wife was well endowed in that department. I don't think managed to leave that one down. But anyway, contributions and donations to campaign financing.
Please, let's get on to it. Yes.
Now, official political campaign financing in Jamaica has been put on a formal legal footing. And this came about in 2006 when the Representation of the People Amendment Act was passed and some regulations was promulgated under it. Now, based upon that act, there are two streams of funding for election campaigning to political parties and candidates. One is a fund set up called the National Election Campaign Fund. And two, contributions and donations to political parties and candidates by individuals or group of people. There are two not slightly, by the regime that governs each, they are different. The common thing about it is that the candidates and the registered political parties get the fund. The National Election Campaign Fund is run by the Director of Elections.
Yes.
Money must be lodged at the Bank of Jamaica and can be invested as a big regime geared to create sort of equality for the parties and for the candidates. And they receive monies not on behalf of candidates or political parties, but they are on behalf of political campaigning. Mm-hmm. No, we're not going to be dealing with that one today because that one is fairly regimented. We're going to be dealing with the contributions and donations to political parties by individual candidates.
Okay.
We can deal with the first one at another time.
Yes, fine.
Now, for every donation that any individual or any company or any entity makes, that contribution or donation must be disclosed to the Electoral Commission, called ECJ, once such a donation or contribution was made during what is called the reporting period. And before I define the reporting period, let me just say what donations and contributions can be. Gifts of money, gifts of any kind, goods, services, property, facilities or equipment, or any form of subscription to political parties. Those generally are what are regarded as contributions and donations. And like I said, they must be reported or disclosed to the ECJ once it was made during the reporting period. What then is the reporting period? The reporting period is the period that begins on the first day of the campaign period and end 181 days
Yes.
or 6 months after the end of the campaign period. Obviously, begs the question, what then is the campaign period? Let me tell you what the campaign period is. But general election, it is a period that starts on the earlier of the day following the last day of 4.5 years or 54 months from the start of the term of the sitting government, or the day on which a prime minister officially announces the election day, whichever comes first. And that period ends one day before the time set for the opening of the polls. In other words, 24 hours before the voting. So let's apply those definitions to this particular case. If the campaign period is the day following the last day of the first 4.5 years, which is 6 months to the end of the 5-year period from the start of this thing. The last election was in September 2005. The next election is in September 2025. It therefore means we are way past the 4.5 years of the first sitting of this government. So we are now in the campaign period.
Yes.
Because it comes earlier than the other possible date, which is the date on which the Prime Minister officially announces the election. He hasn't done that yet. So we're actually in the campaign period. And the campaign period will end 24 hours before the date of the election, before the opening of the polls, before the voting started. So, in other words, the reporting period covers the campaign period. All right. If anybody gives any money to any candidate or any political party outside of the reporting period, there is no legal obligation for any candidate or the party to disclose such contribution to the ECJ, Electoral Commission of Jamaica. Let me say it again. If it's outside the reporting period, there is no legal obligation to disclose of the contribution. And remember what we said the reporting period was. The first day of the campaign period and ends up to 6 months after the end of the campaign period.
Yes.
How we know the end of the campaign period is 1 day before the election date.
Right.
Before polling starts. Now, also, if the donation or the contribution comes outside the reporting period, the candidate or the political party can accept it from all entities except those who cannot or who are prohibited from actually making contribution or prohibited to be accepted as contributors. Now, here are some examples of what the law refers to as non-permissible contributors.
Okay, let's hear.
Yes. First of all, foreign or Commonwealth government or any agent of government or any agent of such government, and whether the contributions are coming directly or indirectly. Any public body, so in other words, the office of the public can make a donation. Any entity whose existence or activities are illegal under any law. So, for example, a gang can make a contribution. Any person or entity whose identity is not disclosed, in other words, it is anonymous. They can't make the contribution, and the political party or the candidate cannot accept from any anonymous person. The person, whether anonymous or not, cannot make the contribution through an intermediary. So, in other words, if I want to support on the party, I can't give Mr. Burgess. I say, Richie, be hand over this to the party. So,
Okay.
no.
Okay.
I have to do myself.
Yes.
And any person or entity who uses a false identification to make the contribution, then you might say, the party might not know that is a false identity. But there may come a time when they find out, and there's actually a mechanism for dealing with that when it is found out.
I know you're moving on to your prepared thought processes, but I'm really thinking through whether or not we are satisfied here about the transparency of the system and whether or not there are loopholes that even concern you yourself at your office.
A lot of loopholes, You see, because people know this law, they can do all that they want to do by way of contribution and facility provided outside of reporting period. But everybody know, even me know what the reporting period is. We know election is coming up. We know when the election is going to be, so we know when the prescribed periods the restricted periods, the prohibited periods start. You make a lump sum contribution, cash kind or whatever favor you want to make outside, and nothing gets on. And in addition to that, and this has no reflection upon the ECJ, the disclosure of the contribution is not necessarily to the world at large. It's to the ECJ. ECJ may or may not, unless there's an obligation, disclose who the contributors are. So there are loopholes. And you know, we Jamaicans are smart. We have a way of keeping our own things. During that said reporting period, the person cannot make a contribution if that person's contribution include anything from one of the impermissible contributors. So, for example, a man wants to make $1 million contribution to a party and there's only he's 600,000 for himself. He can't take 400,000 from the public vendor or from a foreign government or from a gang member to make it up to make the $1 million. Once the contribution is contained of any part from a prohibited or impermissible contributor, that cannot be given, and if it is given, it cannot be accepted. Now, it is deemed the contribution or the donation is deemed to have been accepted if the beneficiary, meaning the registered political party for the candidate, keeps the contribution above or beyond 30 days. If the party or the candidate gives back that donation within the 30-day period, then there is no acceptance under the law. And the sanctions that come with that would not apply. 30 days, what's that point? Now, during the said reporting period, if the contributor is involved in a government contract, and that government contract can be up to 2 years before or 2 years after the donation, that donation must be declared to the Electoral Commission of Jamaica within 14 days of making it or entering into the contract, whichever comes later. So it could be a case, the contract 2 years ago, person had a contract with the government. Election comes some 4 years down the road, contract completed. By virtue of that, he's under duty to actually disclose the contract. He may not have had a contract, but subsequent to making the donation, he's awarded a contract, even properly above board. Then that kicks in the obligation on him. Breach of so informing the ECJ is a crime, and it attracts a fine of $1 million. However, where at the time of the contribution or donation, the donor is then party to an existing contract, no matter the size of the valuable contribution, it is $1, that contribution must be disclosed to the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. Now, suppose the contribution is made during the reporting period. If that donor is not a party to a government contract, whether it has 2 years before or at the time of making the contract, then his contribution will have to be less than $250,000 in value for it to kick in him a legal obligation to report. Once it's $250,000 or more, whether contract or no contract, he has to report it to the ECJ, and the party or candidate benefiting from that donation must also report it to the ECJ. And a point to note here, if that contribution of $250,000 is made up of, say, 5 different amounts of money aggregating to that or more,
yes,
then the money can be break up to avoid that obligation. It's an aggregate which will be looked at, and the reporting condition would be required if it exceeds the $250,000 in value. Failure to do so is a crime, and that crime attracts a fine of $3 million in court or 12 months imprisonment. Now, any contribution accepted during the reporting period must be used for campaign activities. It cannot be used for personal, family business, or any other form of expenses other than electoral campaigning.
And there are ways to check that to ensure that that is being adhered to?
Oh, yes, there are ways of checking it. Because at the end of the election period, each party and each candidate will file with the ECJ what I would call a statement of account, expected and receipt for the election campaign. Yep. In fact, the candidate or the party must give a receipt to the donor at the time of the contribution. And the contribution, like I said, doesn't have to be raw cash. You can cash for a kind. There is a value attached to every favor, every cash or a kind that is given. And some of the reporting, some of the information that must be reported to the ECJ include by the political party, include the donor's name, the donor's address, the type of business. I just have a couple more seconds there, but I see we're under the...
Yeah, but I want to get one, as you mentioned donors, Mr. McKenzie. I wanted to ask whether or not there are safeguards in place to prevent large donors from exerting undue influence over elected officials or public policy.
Regrettably, there is none, because there is no way of telling when a candidate who is a beneficiary of a lump sum is actually acting in favor necessarily or biased to a donor. I mean, it can be assumed, but assuming it is one thing, proving it is another thing. There are lots of talk about, oh yes, because it's on that we know it is so and so and that's a safeguard. It is not a safeguard. If you were to take up $10 million and hand it to one of the political parties, as a benefactor, the political party use it. If 2 months down the road, you get a contract from your broadcast host with the political party, how are they going to say that, oh, it's simply because he handed him a $10 million gift, why he gets a contract? You could show all the meritorious documentation, everything to show that your contract is commercial and at arm's length, and there's nothing to do with your contribution to them. So to that extent, it is hard. Yeah, I just want to finish up by saying that part of the information that the beneficiary party or candidate must give to the ECJ, the date of the contribution, the amount of value, and the description and the nature of the contribution. Because, like I said, it is not always cash. And quite often, benefits come in many different ways in the campaign series. For example, the transport buses that I can't pick around hanging off precariously like they're wings of bat. Button, T-shirt, and all the other paraphernalia. All those two, they have a value as a contribution to a political party.
Okay.
We have shut our bolt on time. More next week.
All right, Mr. McKenzie, I learned a lot. I thank you for the information you shared with us, and I wish you a great